What is up, everyone? I've got a really fun lesson for us today around a topic of compounding interest, right? If you know about it, you've probably heard about the magic that it can create, especially when you understand it and start leveraging it as soon as possible. If you haven't heard about it, no worries. I'm going to educate you on it today. You hear interest, but then there's such thing as compounding interest. And so it's a little bit more powerful, especially when it comes to you growing your wealth faster, right? It's based on investments that you have compounding interest on. So these are actually two separate definitions that I have up here. I liked both of them, and so I'm going to utilize both. Let me move my face out of the way. I'm going to utilize both of them and explain them a little bit. So compounding interest is earning interest on interest, right? This is as an investor, not as you paying debt. So it's earning interest on interest. Instead of just earning on your original investment, which is oftentimes called principal, you also earn on the growth from previous periods. Over time, this creates exponential wealth, as you'll see here in a second as I break the numbers down. Right? Compounding interest is interest that applies not only to the initial principal of an investment or a loan. We're going to talk about investments here, not loans or debts, right? But also the accumulated interest over previous periods. And so let's just say you invested $10,000 and you're making 10% off of that, right? When it's just normal interest, you're only making 10% off of the original 10,000, right? When it's compounding interest, when you make that 10% off of the 10,000, it's added into the number that you can now make interest off of. So as this number grows that you can make interest off of, so does the interest that you're making at a much larger rate than if you were just making interest off of the original 10,000 and not being allowed to add the interest that you earned each year, each period to the number that you're making interest off of. Does that make sense? Let me show you some numbers here. I think it'll make a little more sense. Probably should have just done that in the first place. All right, so here's a little table for us, right? So let's talk about, we got columns for year, got columns for investment, interest rate, interest earned, and account balance. So bear with me here as I talk you through this. So year, we're going to talk about year one, right? You put $10,000 into an investment account. It is making 10%, right? The amount of money that 10% is would be $1,000. So 10% of 10,000 is $1,000. When you add in the initial investment, or what is called principal, to the interest that you've earned, you've now got $11,000 in your account. Does that make sense? Right, so you made 10% on the 10K, which was $1,000. You add that to the original 10K, and now you got 11K. All right, and so this is how compounding interest works. Now, in year two, you can now start making 10% off of that larger amount. So as you can see here, 10% of 11,000 is more than 10% of 10,000, which is the beauty of compounding interest, right? It allows the interest that you made to be added in over here, right? So the interest that you made, the 1,000, to be added into the amount that you're now making the 10% off of. And that's how it starts to add up quickly, compared to if you were just making solely 10% off of the 10K for these next 5 years, right? So as you can see, we get down to year 5, right? You've got an account balance of $14,641, right? And now you're able to make 10% off of that instead of 10% off of 10,000, which you could see is a substantial amount more. 10% of year 5 balance, right, is almost about 1,500 compared to the 10% of the year 1 balance, which was 1,000. You add all of this interest up that you made over the past 5 years, and you made $6,100 in interest, right? Which is now added to your initial 10,000, and now you're making the 10% off of that. Give you an example, right? If you only made, right, 10% off of the 10,000 these past 5 years, which would be 1,000, times 5, right? That was definitely 10,000 times 5, so bear with me. Okay. You would have only made $5,000 in interest, which is a difference of about $1,100, right? And that's an extra $1,100 for you doing nothing extra, right, over these next 5 years. And so I wanted to show you it in a smaller scale, or a smaller scheme, if you will, so you can kind of just wrap your head around the concept before the numbers got too big. But the two things with compounding interest, you want to get this snowball started as fast as you can. So the sooner you can start investing, right, obviously responsibly, there's some things you need to do most times before starting to invest. So consult a professional before you start investing, or just hear this video and start throwing money in, your investment account. Consult a licensed professional, right? But the sooner you can reasonably and responsibly get started with investing, the better, because the sooner we can get compounding interest started. It's like rolling a snowball down the hill, right? The more it gets down the hill, the more it's picking up and turns into, one of those big balls of a snowman, right? Maybe not the best analogy, but you get what I'm saying, right? So it's called that snowball effect. We want to get that going. The sooner, the better. And then also, understanding that this really starts to take off over time. 5 years, it doesn't really show you the magnitude of what compounding interest does. So let me show you over 30 years. So I'm going to pull you over to an investment calculator, which I highly recommend. This is a third-party tool, not my tool, but pay attention over here on the left-hand side. Hopefully it's the left for you guys. Right, the starting amount, 10,000 like before, but instead of 5 years, I've got 30 years, so you can really see the magnitude of what's about to happen here. The return is going to be 10%. We're going to say it's going to compound annually, right, which just means the interest is added into the account balance to now make a larger amount of interest off of that larger balance. And then we're going to continue to throw in $1,000 a month, right, on top of this money. And so hit calculate, right, look over here. Right. The crazy part is that at the end of 30 years, you're going to have $2.3 million. You want to hear the craziest part of this all? 1.9 of that was compounding interest, right? It's the interest that you made, passive interest, passive income on this money. Does that make sense here? And so that's the power of compounding interest, especially over long periods of time. And so I wanted to bring this up and show y'all and give you an example of what it can look like when you first understand compounding interest, and then secondly, start to utilize it, and third, stay patient with it over time, right? Because it's one of those beautiful things where as time goes on, you get 10 years into it, the amount of money that's just compounding on top of each other and the amount of money that's being made for you passively is a beautiful thing. And so this is often a very maybe, I don't want to say misconstrued topic, maybe a little bit confusing on how this works, how compounding interest works. And then ultimately, it's complicated for us to really wrap our heads around the magic that it can produce. So I hope this helped cleared up what this topic is in the first place and helped you see the value in starting to utilize it as soon as you can. So if you got any questions, just drop them in the comments, and I hope this lesson served. See you in the next one.